wait for it to connect. Okay, and officially welcome everyone to this presentation called Widgets Inc. I did not ask how you would like to be addressed, but
Marcos.
By Marcos here. Please take it away. Oh, first, let's begin with a round of applause. Thank you. Yay. All right, take us away.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Shalana.
Shalana, okay, it's nicer than calling you JALT 14, right?
Yes. I didn't even have changed it yet.
So thank you, Shalana. And I'm going to get started right away. We'll try to move through the whole presentation. And then at the end, if there are any questions, we can have time for that, I hope. So this presentation is a promotional presentation about our book, Widgets Inc., written by myself and my co-author, Chris Valvona, who's also in the room. Maybe, Chris, you can wave now. It's a task-based course in workplace English. I'll get through some of the details as we go, but I just wanted to make a quick point at the beginning that although this is a promotional presentation, I think it's worth your time if you are interested in task-based learning, or especially if you're interested in a themed task-based design. It may be useful for you. I think you'll be able to see how we have approached some of the problems inherent in task-based learning. And perhaps you can use some of the information to solve your own issues in your own class. I think somebody has their mic on. Can I ask to turn it off? There's like a clicking sound like it's coming from somewhere.
One moment.
Unmuted. Okay. Okay.
Should just be you now.
Okay, thank you. So Widgets employs a theme task-based syllabus design, which is quite unlike any or most other books you may have seen before. And it will become clear as we go through that it's kind of a different approach to textbook writing and to syllabus design, frankly. And therefore, it might be worth your while if you're not familiar with it, even if you're not planning to use our book in particular. In fact, if you're planning to design your own task-based course. So to give you in a nutshell how it is a TBLT book, Widgets is a task-based course that prioritizes TBLT task-based principles. And that means that in our case, it's a themed course, which means that it's a semester-long, meaningful and real-life-like simulation. And I use this term real-life-like quite purposefully because there are problematic words that people sometimes use in relation to task-based learning, like, for example, authentic or authenticity. These are problematic in a variety of ways, but I want to suggest that it's like real life, the simulation that we create. The course is sequenced by task complexity, not language forms or functions. And this is a really important point. Most textbooks, the organizing principle of nearly all textbooks is language forms. That is, it's sequenced according to language form complexity. So you go from easy to difficult, and as you go through the course, you learn these language forms. And perhaps, and by language forms, I use the term very broadly. So it could be organized by grammar complexity. It could be organized by vocabulary, lexical complexity, or pragmatics, functional notional syllabus, for example. Is another way of organizing a syllabus sequence. So ours is organized by task complexity, which means it begins with quite simple tasks and moves up through the course. And that's a very important point to keep in mind. Again, this will be clearer as we go through. And also another very important point is that it's assessed primarily by task outcome achievement. And again, this will become clearer in this presentation as well. So these 3 points are very important to keep in mind about Widgets because they really highlight how Widgets is very different from other courses. So in terms of it providing a semester-long meaningful simulation, what this means basically is that students simulate working as interns in a tech startup company. And they progress through a simplified but still realistic product development cycle. And they do a variety of tasks, some of them very simple, like water cooler chat, and very open as well. And others a little bit more focused, like, for example, watching a video call from one of the bosses of the company. This happens several times through the course, where the executives of the company give instructions to the students via video conferencing. And then they perform a variety of tasks. In this case, they're performing a focus group halfway through the course. Again, they hear from the executives, and in some cases, there's a kind of a storyline aspect to the story, to the course. And here we see, for example, the CEO of the company is giving feedback to the students and telling them that their work so far has been really good. And then finally, they do a job interview at the end, where they trying to get hired within the company after they've finished the product cycle. So the whole semester is them going through this, this long extended simulation, which has many benefits for language learning, in terms of recycling language, for example, in terms of building confidence, because the students never really lose their place in the course. They always know what comes next, because background knowledge helps them to understand where they are in the course. It has a variety of other sort of motivational as well as language learning benefits. Now, I mentioned already the task complexity syllabus, and the idea here, this is based on Michael Long's idea of building a course by relative task complexity, organizing a course that way, where you begin with simple tasks and slowly build in complexity as you go. The idea being that as the tasks become more and more complex, the students are pushed to develop their language learning as they go along. And of course, in our case, because it's themed, not only are you increasing complexity, in a sense, it's facilitative, because the students, you're increasing complexity, but because you're staying within kind of linguistic realm that they're already familiar with from the previous stage, it becomes easier and motivation building for them to move. And what we found is the students can move through the stages quite quickly, although they become complex quite quickly. And then finally, this other point of assessment is really important to the course. Students are assessed primarily by outcome achievement, which means that you're not looking at language forms in order to perform assessment. You're looking at whether they have done the task adequately enough to be considered well, adequate achievement of that task. So how did Widgets come about? Well, Chris and I were working in Okinawa. Chris is still in Okinawa, as you can see from his background image here. We were working in Okinawa a number of years ago, more than 10 now. And we were teaching at some schools where we were teaching oral communication classes that were mixed level. And it was difficult to target them with textbooks that were available. And so at the time, I started doing a variety of tasks. I had finished my master's at the time and had in my mind task-based learning, because I had focused on task-based assessment in particular. So what I started doing is I disregarded the textbook, and I started creating these courses that where students would perform a variety of tasks. And one of the sort of task cycles that I did had to do with students making infomercials for a product, and then performing them as little skits. And so this was working really well. So I decided to sort of add on components to it, and I had them develop products and then do a commercial on the product. That was the first cycle. And around this time, Chris and I, who were friends at the time, were talking about these lessons, and Chris mentioned something that he had started doing in his classes, which was based on a book that he received as a kind of gag gift called Unuseless Japanese Inventions. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. But it was quite a fun approach to sort of wacky inventions. And Chris was using these as a way of getting his students engaged in the classroom. So we combined the two ideas together, and we kind of created this, this task cycle where students would pretend to be working for this company called Widgets, and then not only create the product, but then make a decision as to which product is best out of all the products in the class, then go and do a market research cycle, and then advertise the product. So all of these things sort of came together, and then we decided that after a couple of semesters that we had enough for a proposal. We put together a proposal for Pearson Longman, which was basically the complete course. And it was already a complete course from beginning to end. We had feedback from students, we had feedback from a few other teachers who had tried some of the tasks. And we were fortunate enough that Pearson picked it up and published the first edition of Widgets in 2008. I see that Takeshi Kamimura, one of our Pearson colleagues, who's been very helpful in the last 10 years or so, is here in the room today. Takeshi knows Widgets very well, and Pearson did a really good job, frankly, putting it together. I will admit I was never a big textbook guy when I started this. In fact, that's why we started writing Widgets, because we couldn't find a book that really targeted our needs. Pearson, at the time, was very receptive to new ideas, and was very helpful once Widgets itself came out, and especially Pearson in Japan. So I recommend, if you're looking for books, go see their booth at JALT. They have a really good team here in Japan.
Marcos, can I just say Michio is here as well? I think Michio has just come into the room.
Oh, I don't see. Okay, but that's great. Again, a big hello to our Pearson colleagues from before. Then, however, it came time to do a new edition, and Pearson wasn't interested in doing a second edition of Widgets. So we got my own publisher that I had started at previously to this, Atama-ii Books. And we published a second edition of Widgets, which went on to win last year the ELTons, which is the sort of the Academy Awards of English language textbooks. So you can see Chris and I there on stage with some luminaries of London, and on the red carpet and so on. They do a big celebration, very Academy Awards-like. So that's a brief history of Widgets, and that's where we are now. So we have now a second edition of a course that we've been tweaking over the last 10 years or so. So I want to go a little bit through the stages of Widgets. And again, keep in mind that this is a themed course, and keep in mind that the students are moving through this with purpose. It's not unit by unit, and then next unit is something different. These units build on each other by complexity. You can see, for example, stage 1 is intern orientation, and basically the students are doing very simple tasks here. They essentially read a letter that invites them to join the company as an intern. Then they join on the first day of the job. They make name tags, and they shake hands and get to know each other. So it's a kind of introduction, orientation to the company. It's very simple tasks, right? These are very easy tasks. And you'll see how very quickly the tasks become more complex. They also watch video about the company, and they find out some of the products of the company and so on. They do some free chats called water cooler chats, which is another opportunity for them to get to know each other and kind of engage in freer conversation within the context of the simulation. And you'll see that everything that we do within the course is we attempt to put some kind of authentic, real-life-like kind of hook to it, so that it fits together as part of this extended simulation. So instead of simply having warm-up chat at the beginning of class, we called it a water cooler chat, because it then helps the students to get into the warm up not just their language faculties, but also their sense of being in an English-speaking environment. And then they watch videos. I'll show you a quick example here of the introduction to the company. This is the introduction that the students actually see. As you watch this video, bear in mind that the videos are at a relatively high, pretty much an authentic level of speech. What we do with the videos in Widgets is we present these videos at a relatively authentic level, and we encourage students then to, in small groups, watch the videos and piece together the content, piece together the meaning as much as possible. We do, of course, have subtitles for all the videos as well. So I'm going to play this one. And I should note that all the videos are available at widgepedia.com. We've just made that open access, so anybody can go watch the videos and even download them if you like. Let me play this first video that introduces the company. I hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to Widgets, your future today. At Widgets, we make products for your life and comfort. Do you have a problem in your life? Widgets has the solution. And if we don't yet, well, we're working on it. Widgets was started just 5 years ago. That was when 3 university students had the idea to start a new kind of company. A company to make exciting products that no one had ever seen before. A company to change the world. Today, Widgets is a major international company with offices in Tokyo, New York, Hong Kong, London, and more. You have seen Widgets' many exciting products in stores and online. But have you met the young visionaries behind this amazing success story? Meet Mickey May, CEO of Widgets. Last year, The Economist magazine called her a true marketing genius of our time. Titus Pinch. This superstar CFO has doubled Widgets' profits year after year. Jessica Sparks, CTO and head of R&D. She is the creator of many of Widgets' best-selling products. How did they do it? It wasn't easy. Mickey, Jessica, and Titus worked around the clock to get all of their new products on the market. They tested new ideas, asked customers what they liked or disliked, and prepared advertising campaigns. Today, Widgets hires the most creative minds in business and technology through its famous internship program. Widgets interns work hands-on to brainstorm new products, do market research, prepare advertising campaigns, and much more. Many apply to be an intern at Widgets, but only the best and most hardworking are chosen to join the company full-time. Do you have what it takes? Widgets, your future today.
Then they move on to the product catalog. As you can tell, of course, we very much kept to that spirit of the unuseless inventions from the original idea of having these wacky products. But don't get sort of off the track in terms of the wackiness. We use this as a little bit of a hook to get students interested, but it's really beside the point to a certain extent. The idea is the students are creating product ideas. We aren't necessarily encouraging them to create crazy ideas. We're encouraging them to create new and original, interesting ideas. Sometimes teachers think that the wackiness of the product is the whole hook of the course, and it really isn't. Although, of course, it is fun to discuss, and it's a way of creating interest for students to talk about it. So they learn, of course, about some of the current products of the company. In this case, by reading a kind of online catalog, they can comment on which they like better. In this case, it's a kind of ranking activity and discussion between students. And they're learning about these products because they're soon going to be developing some products for the company. And this is a way of, again, scaffolding and getting them up step by step towards greater complexity, task complexity. Now, this is the end of stage one, and at the end of each stage, students have an opportunity for self-evaluation. This is really quite an important part of the course because, as I mentioned before, we don't focus on language forms. We focus on task complexity. It's a truly communicative course in that sense. And one of the problems then becomes, how do you do assessment? How do you grade students through the course? And students themselves aren't quite sure how this is going to be happening. They're expecting grammar quizzes and vocabulary quizzes and so on. So what we have done is set up a variety of assessment opportunities, including what you're seeing here, which is a self-assessment opportunity at the end of each stage. Students basically complete what's called an intern evaluation form. Again, we tried to keep to that sense of authenticity of the simulation. So it's like an employee review kind of form. So students fill in this paperwork by answering some questions about how well they're doing in terms of attendance and participation, but also in terms of performance based on the tasks that we have in the stage. So as you can perhaps read here, they're, how they judge how well they can meet people and shake hands, ask questions in a conversation, take notes from video information, and so on, which are all sort of mini tasks that they do throughout stage one. And they also have an opportunity to write slightly longer explanation of what they've done. We encourage them to think about what they have learned so far and what they can do to improve. And it's also an opportunity for the teacher to give feedback on these items as well. We find that at the beginning of the course, students often aren't quite sure how to answer these questions, right? So they might answer in a very generic sense. They might say, I have learned to communicate, right? Which then, as a teacher, gives me an opportunity to give them feedback and say, okay, so what does this mean to communicate? Exactly how have you improved? To get them to think about issues like, oh, I feel more confident. Okay, why do you feel more confident? Or how can I improve can involve factors such as, setting goals. So if a student, for example, says that they haven't been speaking only in English during the class, they report that they've been speaking in Japanese, then this is my chance as a teacher to say, okay, so I notice you haven't been speaking in English enough. How can you improve that? Perhaps you can start next class with a goal in mind that I'm going to speak, at least 50% of the time is going to be in English today, right? Set that goal for yourself, and then let's see if you meet it. So this keeps the students focused on what it is that we're doing in the class in terms of language learning. And then stage two is the research and development. So this is where the real work begins. This is where the students start on their product cycle. Now they're going to create a product within the company. And so for stages 2 to 5, they're placed into teams. The teams that they're in don't change in the course. And this is something that teachers sometimes think is a strange setup. Why wouldn't the teams change from stage to stage? Well, there's a few advantages. Of course, there are some advantages of changing the teams each stage, but there are some advantages of not changing teams as well. One of them is that the students become more and more familiar and perhaps confident by talking to the same person, the same small group of people for an extended time. Another advantage is that they can learn from each other a little bit better in a closer sense. Another advantage, which goes toward the authenticity of the tasks in the course, is that when you work for a company, and let's say you work in the R&D department, you create a product, you don't later on get to also do marketing for that same product, right? People are divided up into departments, generally speaking, in a company. And so what we want to do is to give the students a sense of what it feels like to receive a product idea that you didn't create and then have to do something with it as a team. So there's a variety of benefits. One of the benefits too is that it allows us to have one student as project manager at each stage. The ideal number for the group number in widgets is 4 students per group. It still works with 3 or 5, but the ideal is 4. And what that means is that stage 2, one person will be the project manager, stage 3, a different person, stage 4, and stage 5, each different people. And again, we've noticed some real benefits from this process. One of them being that when they vote for their first project manager in stage 2, they tend to select the person who's the most confident at English to be the first project manager. In other words, they end up selecting the best, the most proficient, usually, student in English in class for what actually ends up being the easiest stage, right? And what happens is that you're then setting the bar really high, which means that stage 3, although the complexity of the tasks becomes a little higher, the project manager has already done such a good job in stage 2 that the next project manager now has a model to follow, right? And so on towards the end. And so that's another benefit of this project manager and team setup. I'm going to go quickly through all this stuff, but if anyone has any questions, please, write them down and then bring them up at the end if you like. But a really important part of stage 2, because we're talking about coming up with creative ideas, creative inventions, is setting up how to be creative, which isn't an easy thing to do. So we begin by scaffolding this for students by having a reading task and a discussion task where they consider a number of innovative product ideas that have so-called changed the world. And then we guide them through a brief brainstorming process. So you can see some ideas here. The cat's eyes on the road reflect light. The next one is Velcro, as we call it in English, but actually has that's a brand name. Students don't know that. And Post-it notes, or sticky notes, as the regular product is called. So they do a little bit of a reading activity and discussion based on these. And then we encourage them to start thinking about how to brainstorm. We give them an example. This story, I don't know if you can read the writing very clearly here, but basically it shows the character from the book, the chief technology officer, Jessica, and she explains how she comes up with new ideas. She's the most creative one out of the group. And we set it up by thinking of a problem that you have in your everyday life. So in her example, she's always losing her phone, right? Her desk is messy. What can I do? I'm always losing my phone. And then she comes up with an idea. Oh, I have an idea. How about a phone that sticks to the wall? Just stick it up to the wall and I won't lose it. And it's always there for me, right? So that's how she comes up with this idea. And then the students discuss, is that a useful idea? Is it a safe idea? Is it original? Is it possible? And so on, to discuss the quality of the idea. And then they go on to themselves think about problems that they might have in their life. The example in the book is I always wake up late because there's no sunlight in my room. And the student may think, okay, well, that's a problem. I always come to school late. That's a very common problem with our students, we find. Something about waking up in class or something like that. So they make a list of these problems in the brainstorming section, and then they help each other to come up with some solutions, right? How about a robot that wakes you up? How about a light that shines a light in your face to simulate sunlight, and so on. And once they've come up, they go through perhaps a class or two in which they're discussing these ideas, and then they write out a product proposal. And again, we have an example of a written product proposal here. They discuss what's a good product proposal, what's not. They write their own, and then they submit it. If you can imagine, if you're doing this in a face-to-face class, then there's lots of opportunity here for the teams to be discussing things with each other. There's also, of course, video that helps them to get the idea. So again, this character, Jessica, actually talks to them through the video in the form of a kind of an authentic conference call from the boss, right? And she gives them their task, which is to come up with a product proposal. The other task that they do is an elevator pitch. And this is the oral task for the stage. Each stage has a written task and an oral task. And the elevator pitch, if you're familiar with the concept, is a very short pitch of an idea. And there's, again, video support that would help the students through it. I'm going to show you an example made by a student because it's a simple concept and you'll get it even if you don't know what an elevator pitch is. So I'll go straight into the example and then I'll discuss a couple of things about it afterwards. This is, by the way, a very good example.
Hello there, I'm Yoshifumi. I'm going to introduce you a new way to entertain yourself at home. Do you like watching videos, dramas, or movies on your smartphone or tablet? This is for you. Theater Box. It makes you feel you are watching movies or at a movie theater. The usage is straightforward. First, put the box at the head of your bed. Second, plug in the box. Third, connect your smartphone or tablet to it. That's all. Now you just put your head inside. Theater Box has many speakers on the inside. They surround you with sound from all directions. Stay home, enjoy your theater.
It's a very good example of an elevator pitch. You'll notice, I want you to think of a couple of things in terms of task complexity here. An elevator pitch, of course, is a mini presentation. In this case, it's about a minute long, and that's an important requirement. Can't be too much longer than that. This one was just about a minute. It's a single person talking. It should be rehearsed many times. It's scripted. But it needs to be persuasive. It needs to fit certain parameters. And you can imagine how this is an easier task than what's coming next. We're building towards bigger presentations. So that's one thing to bear in mind, is that the relative complexity or lack of complexity to an elevator pitch compared to a regular presentation, which comes next. But also aspects of task-based assessment. So as you were watching that, you probably thought, okay, that's pretty good. You probably would give it a 9 or a 10 out of 10. But maybe as language teachers, you were thinking as well about how to assess the student. Were you thinking perhaps in terms of pronunciation errors that he might have made, or perhaps you were thinking in terms of sort of pragmatics or gestures and so on, paralinguistic features you might have been using. In task-based assessment, this is kind of one of the problems with implementing task-based learning, is that task-based assessment is not really all that intuitive for teachers necessarily. And what I mean is that, you know, we approach assessment with a certain paradigm, let's say, of how we measure things, of how we judge student performance. And we can do, for example, grammar quizzes, vocabulary quizzes. We can spot errors in pronunciation. We kind of have this error deduction kind of mentality. But that doesn't really work for task-based assessment, because with task-based assessment, what you're trying to do is have a very strong focus on whether that communicative principle is being followed, whether communication, meaningful communication, is happening. And so really the most important thing in task-based assessment is a very first step should always be, is the task outcome achieved? In other words, does the student do the thing that you have asked them to do? Okay, and that's a very simple yes or no question. Okay, and this is something perhaps that the teachers sometimes get lost in their lists of items that they're checking off when they do speeches and so on. But really that first requirement is very, very important, because if that's not reached, then the student needs to do it again. It doesn't matter how good your pronunciation is if your task is off the script completely and something different. So in this case, we can say, did the student perform an elevator pitch? Well, yes, clearly he did. Okay. If there was some critical error, some critical problems in there, he didn't perform it, you can't reasonably say that it's an elevator pitch. And it could be for any reason. Right? It could be perhaps his pronunciation was so weak that you couldn't understand anything he was saying. Okay, then it's not adequately achieved, right? It's not adequately achieved. It could be that he prepared a commercial rather than an elevator pitch, right? He did something totally different. Again, he didn't achieve the task outcome. It doesn't matter in that case why or why not, okay? So that first question is super important, yes or no. If it's yes, then you go to step 2, which is how well is it achieved? And in the case of our elevator pitches, I prefer to grade them out of 10 because it's an easy kind of rubric to keep in my mind. So how well is it achieved? Give it a score from 6 to 10. If we were thinking about that guy we just watched, I personally would give that perhaps a 9. That may be different for you, but I think that was a 9. It wasn't absolutely perfect, but it was pretty close. And then I would give feedback. Now it's important to note that this includes feedback on language forms. In task-based learning, you're not focusing on language forms primarily. But of course, as a secondary consideration, you do. We are teaching language after all. So it's not like you can't teach grammar. It's just that you're teaching grammar after the fact, in a sense. So at this point, it is absolutely appropriate to say, you know, your presentation was very good. However, you made these grammar mistakes, or however, this word that you used isn't perfect, so perhaps this word would be better, and so on. So you can focus on language forms at this point, but your feedback can also be more holistic than that. It can in fact include any of these items that you would want to include, eye contact, gestures, any of this stuff. Note, by the way, that if the answer is no to step number 1, it doesn't mean that the student fails. Okay, because what you would want to do ideally in a TBLT, oops, here we go. In a TBLT framework, what you want to do, if possible, is to give the student a chance to do it again after they have the feedback. Okay. All right, so keeping this in mind, please keep this in mind as you watch the next video. Okay, so I'm going to show you just one more, which is only 1 minute long. I'll show you one more.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you, but I'd like to propose my new product idea, and I think you will love it. Thank you, I'll be just a minute. So here it is. I name it Nagomi, and this is a brand new product combining aroma diffuser and music player, but each can be used independently. It's for people who have trouble sleeping or have stressful days. The usage is very simple. First, put water and a few drops of aroma oil in the diffuser, then press the start button. Later, connect your phone with the music player by Wi-Fi and then play your favorite music. This product can be used by anybody regardless of age, so I believe it will definitely be a bestseller around the world.
We have here, of course, another excellent performance, right? And perhaps at this point, this is where somebody always puts up their hand in the audience and say, wow, okay, but you're choosing the best students you have. Yeah, of course, we chose these 2 because they're quite good, because we wanted to show, put our best foot forward first and show you some good examples. But we do have students at a variety of levels. I mentioned at the beginning that Chris and I started this process because we had mixed level classes. And that was one of the problems we were trying to achieve by having a task-based course, is to be able to target high-level and low-level students all in the same class at the same time. And if you follow this assessment procedure, step 1, 2, 3 here, it's actually quite easy to be able to judge the adequacy of the performance for high-level students as well as low-level students, because low-level students can still do this. They may have bigger problems with pronunciation and so on, but they can still practice. They can write a script, they can rehearse many times, and they can put out something that is actually quite good. I'll show you an example of a lower proficiency level student a little bit later. But this allows us to provide feedback to those students as well, to all of these students, a range of students in the class. And then again, we get to another paperwork section at the end of stage 2, after they've completed these 2 big tasks. And because of COVID this year, we've been trying a couple of different ways of doing it. We've tried, for example, a Google form, setting up a Google form where students do it online, which has worked pretty well. But in the case of my own students, they have the physical book, although we are teaching online. So what they do is what you see in this photo in the middle here. They fill out their book, then they take a photo and send it to me. And then I use that as a way of verifying how they're doing. We also have downloadable pages where you could just download, print a PDF and then do it that way. And just to zoom in here on some of the comments. So this one particular student has, this is stage 2, mind you. So the comments are still a little bit more general than I would like. They get more and more focused on what they're doing as they go through the stages. But in this case, you can see he's mentioning a couple of things. He has learned how to tell their ideas more effectively. He's just done a product pitch, of course. And he is already thinking about, next time I want to repeat it without looking at the script so much, to improve his speaking skill. And they're also encouraged to give themselves a grade, what they think they deserve at this point, and as well as what they would like to get at the end of class. Again, it's a way of getting the students to think about what they're doing in class. So it's not just free conversation. It's not just have fun and speak English. It's like, wait a second, what exactly am I doing and how can I get better? And then stage 3 is when they make an executive decision. Now in stage 2, they're in a team of 4, as I mentioned. And each person in the team comes up with one product proposal, which is their best idea. Now in stage 3, these 4 ideas get sent to another team. Okay? And now that other team has to review these 4 ideas from a different team and choose the one that is the best. Okay? And that's the focus of stage 3, making this executive decision. So they use something called a SWOT analysis, which is a business tool to weigh the pros and cons. This is the new feature in the 2nd edition of Widgets. SWOT analysis is a simple way of being able to judge pros and cons in terms of internal and external factors. Internal factors are the ones that have to do with the product itself, and external have to do with the environment, so trends in society and so on. And again, they watch a video that helps them to understand the concept. Okay? I'm going to show you this video of the professional cast of the book discussing the pros and cons. So think about that from a SWOT analysis point of view, but also pay attention to the girl who is leading the discussion, because she is a great example of the project manager too. So she's doing a great job sort of managing the discussion.
Okay, the first product we need to analyze is the guilt jar. Let's see. According to the product proposal, its purpose is to help people stay healthy by cutting down on cookies. How does it do that? Oh, I see. You set your cookie limit for the day, and when you get close to that number, it gives you messages to make you feel guilty. Funny. Okay, let's start the SWOT analysis with the internal factors, the strengths and the weaknesses. Any thoughts?
I agree that it's funny, and it's really easy to understand. Those are strengths.
Right. And selling it would be easy because we could make a funny commercial for it, so easy to advertise, that's another strength.
But let's be honest, it's probably not very effective for dieting. Could that be a weakness?
Yes, I think so. Also, no one would pay a high price for something like this, so it would need to be cheaply made, and that means it would break easily, and that's a big weakness.
True. And also, dieting is quite a serious business for most people, and this just doesn't feel, well, serious, you know? We wrote down funny as a strength, but maybe that's a weakness too.
Absolutely. Okay, great. These are some really good points. Now, how about the external factors? Can you think of some threats and opportunities?
Well, people these days really care about being healthy, so it's a good time to launch this kind of device. That's an opportunity, right?
Yes. Also, these kinds of gag gifts have been really popular recently at office and club Christmas parties. That's another opportunity.
On the other hand, I read an article last week that said that people are getting really tired of all these talking devices in their home. So that could be a threat if people decide that enough is enough.
That's a good point. And actually, I've seen a lot of phone apps that do the same kind of thing. So there's a lot of competition too. Okay, let's write both of those down as threats.
And don't forget another big threat, which is that this idea is easy to copy by other companies. So even if this is successful, we could still lose in the end.
Okay. Good job, guys. I think we've done a good analysis there. Let's move to the next product.
And of course, the teams in the class watch this and they use it as a kind of model, as an example. And then they do their own, they fill in their own SWOT analysis. Here we're looking at an example from my own class this semester, where the students have looked at 3 different products and they're weighing the pros and cons of each, and they're going to come up with one product that's their selection. So just to zoom in a little bit, this is one of the products that they're looking at, and you can see the comments that they're making are pretty good in terms of critical thinking, being creative, coming up with creative solutions and creative understanding of the problem. These guys are doing a pretty good job. The product is called the Can-Rear, which is basically robot legs that walk with you as you go shopping, right? And so they're looking here, and you can see that, the internal factors, it's easy to use, it's convenient, it's a funny name, right? Perhaps these aren't the best comments about the good points, but the harmful, the internal factors, the weaknesses, basically, are that it's perhaps a little heavy, expensive. Maybe the walking speed would be a problem. Is it too slow or too fast, right? So they're thinking about what could be the weaknesses of the product. And again, the external factors. Recently, robots are very popular. That's a good point, right? People have their Roombas to robot vacuum cleaners and things like that. Another good external factor is good for elderly people, right? So Japan's aging population, something like this could be a good opportunity for this kind of product, right? And so on. Harmful. Well, this is a really good point too, right? Recently, online shopping is popular. So people don't go shopping so much just on the internet. If the trend is that people aren't going to go shopping so much in person, then maybe that's a threat to the success of this product. So the teams are judging all of the products along these criteria, according to these criteria, and then they make a choice of the one that goes into production. The next step is that they put together all these notes. They're basically taking notes of the pros and cons of each product. So then they put together a product review memo in which they talk about each of the products they've looked at according to their good points and bad points. And then they prepare a poster presentation, which again has a video example in the book. This photo is from better times when we used to meet in person without our faces being hidden. This picture is from, I think, from about 10 years ago. It's actually from my class in Okinawa. I don't have any, poster presentations are a little bit difficult. I'll talk about assessment in a minute. So lately what I have been doing is online. And a poster presentation, unfortunately, is not something that translates very well to online because then it just becomes basically a little mini presentation like what I'm doing now, right? You're screen sharing. But nevertheless, it's still a kind of mini presentation. And in terms of relative complexity, it's above that elevator pitch that they did before, but it's still below a more formal kind of presentation that they're going to do later. It's less complex than that because it's shorter. So ours were about 5 minutes long. But one of the inherent strengths, the advantage of a poster presentation is that you get to do the same presentation again and again several times, so that by the time you do it, your final time, you're actually doing a really good job and you're gaining confidence and so on. but it's still not so many as potentially you could be doing at the elevator pitch, where you could be recording it 20 times for all we know, right? So the pressure is on a little bit, but it's not excessive pressure. So it's still a step towards raising complexity. And another factor that I haven't mentioned so much yet is peer assessment. So I've talked about self-assessment, having the students think about what it is that they're doing, but peer assessment is introduced here at stage 3, where the students, during the poster presentation, the team is split in half. So they present and the other half walks around as the audience members. And when they return, they switch again, right? So as audience members, they evaluate each other's poster presentations. And this is a page from the book. So they have a little card there where they can write down what they think. But just like the assessment criteria I gave before, this is very simple. We don't have too many items. Keeping assessment simple is a really important thing with TBLT. The feedback should be as robust as possible, but that first decision should really hinge on that yes or no. Is it good enough or not? So what I have been doing actually now, and this has been working really well, is I've set up Google Forms for students to evaluate each other. So as they're watching the presentations online, they're going through these Google Forms. At the end of the presentation, they go through the Google form and they score it. And this, of course, makes it very easy to analyze the data afterwards and to also give the data back to the students. So this is feedback that is written by the other students in the class based on one of the presentations. And I also give feedback using the same form. And sometimes I put my feedback in there and I don't tell the students which one is from the teacher, which one is not, just to keep it fun. Because all of the feedback, frankly, is useful and they can think about it. So the peer feedback becomes a really important factor. And this, if you can imagine, of course, students are they're doing a task, they're assessing how they've done the task, they're also receiving feedback from other students. This is all improving their next task performance, right? So when they move on to reflect on how they're doing, they could perhaps take some of this on board. They can also, what I like doing with stage 3 is I like actually keeping the feedback open to all the groups. So they can not only see how their group did, but they can actually get the feedback from peers for all the other groups as well. So they can see how their group is doing relative to other groups, which is also a good way to learn and to see where there's some need for you to improve. Stage 4 is market research. And, oh, geez, 5 minutes left, huh? So market research is basically hinged on whether they do a focus group or a survey. And again, we have a great video of a focus group being performed. This is one aspect of Widgets where the second edition, we moved more towards focus group than surveys because we thought it would be a better kind of class-based task to have. But in the COVID world where you're doing things online, actually it turns out that a survey is much easier to do because you can easily distribute it online, and it's much more difficult to do a focus group online. It's not impossible, it can still be done, but I've loosened things up with my own students and I've allowed them to, instead of doing one single focus group, I allow each student in the team to do an interview of 1 or 2 people, come back, and then they put their data together as to how people think about the product, right? I should note as well, by the way, so in stage 2, they create a product and that product gets passed to another team in stage 3. Stage 3, they make a decision which product goes into production, and then that product gets passed to another team again. So now when they're doing market research, they've received a new product that they're researching and asking other students what they think, or other people what they think, rather. Here's an example of a market research report. I know you can't read it, it's kind of small, but this is basically what they're doing. They're basically summarizing the product cycle so far, and very importantly, giving recommendations based on the market research. So in other words, it looks like this product will be popular with young people, not old people, therefore we should change how we market it and so on. And again, they do a paperwork self-assessment at the end. And I've mentioned the project manager interviews, and I haven't really given much example. This is what I do at the end of each stage. I take the project manager out and I schedule a 10-minute interview with them outside of class time. This is done on Zoom. And I'll show you just a clip from this one. This is a student, and you'll see that this student is at a lower proficiency level. It's the same class as the other student that we saw before, but she's at a quite lower proficiency level, but she still manages to do the task. Okay, the task here being to talk about how the team did and how they performed the last stage. So let's listen for just a few seconds here.
I gave the roles to Misaki.
What role did you give her?
Making PowerPoint.
Okay.
All my old members did make
Script.
Script.
Yeah. You mean the writing of the
Yes,
what you're
yes.
going to say, right?
Yes.
Script.
It's each other.
Mm-hmm.
And
You mean they did it together?
no,
But separate?
yes.
Individually? By themselves?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Doing the task in the sense that I'm getting useful information about how the team did, right? So that which is the task. So I just wanted to show that to show how even though, of course, she's not as fluent as the previous students we've seen, she's still doing something meaningful with the language, right? And that's the really important part of having a communicative approach, is that all students at all levels can be doing something meaningful rather than struggling with a difficult grammar point that they're never going to get. Finally, stage 5, they do an advertising campaign. And again, this has all been building up. So they're using the information from all the previous groups to then create an advertising campaign that includes, well, they brainstorm different ideas depending on who the target audience is. They prepare a video commercial perhaps, and that kind of thing is also highlighted and scaffolded in the book. We see an example here of an ad campaign slideshow. This is from one of Chris's teams, and I'm going to have to end with their presentation here. This is their slideshow. Their product is called the Moti-oka Vazo, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, but this is an app they created. It's Motivation plus Matsuoka Shuzo, who is a famous, I think he was a tennis player, and now he's a motivational guy. So that's important to know so that you understand their presentation. So they've done this whole multimedia presentation that they're giving. You can imagine students are talking through these PowerPoints. And then they get to their video commercial, which is here.
One morning, Professor Yoshiki from Okinawa Widgets University was teaching English to his class.
All right, it's time to start class. We are review for our final exam today.
But there was one problem. His students had no motivation whatsoever.
It's time for your test.
Wow,
you can write after you finish.
And of course, the students did horrible on their tests. Let's pause here for a moment. What if the students use Moti-oka Vazo before the test?
もっと熱くなれよ。熱い血燃やしてけよ。人間熱くなった時が本当の自分に出会えるんだ。だからこそもっと熱くなれよ。
I can do it. Actually, I
job.
Thank you, yay! Thanks to the Motioka Basil,
We are very motivated to study and
we got A+. Yeah, high five!
Motioka Basil can be used not only in class, but anytime, anywhere, within seconds. Looking for motivation? You can find it with just one fingertip right in your hands with Motioka Basil.
If anyone wants to see more about this, please come to our Zoom session tomorrow morning.
Let's pause here for a moment.
Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna have to pause here for a moment. Indeed, from 9 to 12 tomorrow morning, I'll be in our Zoom room, so you can look for us on our EME room for Atama-ii Books. In any case, stage 6 is a job interview. Now, what happens here is the students have done all the simulated tasks up until now, and so they get to the end and they do a job interview where they create a resume and talk about all the things they've done. So their job interview includes questions and answers like, you know, I see that you're a project manager for an advertising campaign. Can you tell me about that? And of course, the student can, because they've done these things. So it becomes a very meaningful and also very complex job interview task. I'm going to have to, sorry to rush the end here. There are other things I wanted to talk about, but please come and find us and we'll talk about it later.
If you are available, there is in the Hangouts area, you can just grab one of the open breakout rooms and you can continue this conversation there. It looks like we need to clear this out. I see the other host is coming in for the next session. I'm so sorry.
No problem. Sorry to go over time. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. And I'll go to the Hangouts now. So if anybody's looking for us, I'll see you there.